I'll just get started. So, as you'll see, the title of this post is A Cape Verdean Blueprint, Creolization as a Global Path Forward. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me start off by saying that I'm Cape Verdean. And that feels weird to say and think that people actually know what I'm talking about. All my life, I've been Cape Verdean, but all of my life, no one ever knew what I was talking about unless they were Cape Verdean too, or they lived in somewhere in Boston or some parts of New York. But my family left New York when I was one-ish, not even, and moved to Virginia, where my mom grew up. And basically, I spent most of my time in that area of the country. But I grew up culturally Cape Verdean and Black American in terms of cultural uh, upbringing in the South. I spent a large time around Cape Verdeans, spoke Creole, grew up eating kush kush and kachupa gazat, those sorts of things. I've been to Cape Verde. So my brother lives in Cape Verde right now. My older sister also was born in Cape Verde. So I have had a good depth of Cape Verdean cultural exposure. However, when I used to try to tell people that the reason why I had this name, Pedro Signorinha Ramos Montero Silva, was because my family is Cape Verdean on my dad's side. My mom's side of the family is from the island of Dominica, but I grew up just exposed to Cape Verdean culture. So I never could explain it to people. I would tell them where it was. I point on a globe and say, "See these little islands right here? That's where my family's from." And still nothing. So sometimes, as a shortcut, I would say Portuguese because my dad, when he came to the United States in 1973, Cape Verde still belonged to Portugal, and so my dad's passport was Portuguese. That aside, why am I talking about a Cape Verdean blueprint? Well, first and foremost, as you know, Cape Verde has been really showing themselves as a country um, of pride and of skill when it comes to soccer in this World Cup, their first time qualifying as a small nation. And they've really been holding their own. And now people are all of a sudden being like, who are these people who've been around? And pretty much there's Cape Verdeans in a lot of places all over the planet. Even like when I lived in Arizona, I was walking in a Office Depot one time and I saw some people and I looked at them and I was like, oh, they look Cape Verdean. And then they were looking at me too. And then they were like, Cape Verdeano? Bota fala Creole? And I was like, oh, fala. Then they were like, oh, and then they're like, what? So they're everywhere. Um, So it's like, but there's sprinkled everywhere. So a lot of people don't know about the country. And I just kind of like, at some point in my life, I came to this conclusion that I had to decide. I just got tired of explaining. So I decided I had to choose in my mind, and I can say a lot more about that later. I had to choose between being Cape Verdean or identifying as Cape Verdean and just identifying as Black. And I chose to just identify as Black for a whole lot of reasons that I won't get into right now. But I made that decision largely because of um, white supremacy culture. I'm not going to get into that either. What I really want to talk about, though, is that in Cape Verde, right, you can have a person that looks like me, and then you can have a person that looks like Madonna, and they'll all be cousins, and all will say they're Cape Verdean, and it doesn't matter if they're from Santo Antão or Brava or Sal or Praia or any of those things. They all just know we're Cape Verdean, right? There's a little bit of distinctions in terms of like accents and stuff like that, a little few slang words or whatever the case may be, but they all will identify as Creoles, Cape Verdean Creoles. The language that they speak in the street is Creole. And I have learned that perhaps I won't say I've learned definitively, but in my life, I didn't really. value my Cape Verdean culture to the degree that I could, because it was an inconvenient sometimes in the South. Because people be like, well, why does your dad have this accent? And why your siblings have this accent? Or why do you speak a different language? Why do you have that name in a place where it was mostly just black and white people? So I just kind of just eventually just was like, I'm black and I'm just not going to talk about it unless I have to. That's to my own detriment now that I'm thinking about it and watching everything that's unfolding on the world stage. But what I want to point out is that I've come to understand that creolization, intentional creolization, might be the only path forward for our planet. Because what Cape Verdeans have mastered and what Creole people all over the world have mastered is they know how to take the best parts of every culture that they're exposed to, intricately weave them into one another and create something that is beautiful and distinct and values everything that people has to contribute, and without losing a sense of their identity. I mean, there's some people, I'm not going to lie, there's some people that have some of that colorism and other stuff like that, which is in part why I decided that I wasn't going to participate in all this stuff anymore and just identify as black, not just from Cape Verdeans, but just globally. But from a internal dynamic of how one deals with oneself, I have found that identifying as Creole internally is a very cool way of engaging the world, because besides speaking Creole, and I'll tell you this another thing about Creoles while I'm bouncing all over the place, is most Cape Verdeans can speak at least 3 languages at some point. Because if they leave Cape Verde, they're already going to speak Creole, which is street language. They're going to speak Portuguese if they went to school, and a lot of them learn at least some English. Then a lot of people, in order to kind of have opportunity, they leave and go to other places. So they end up learning other languages and stuff. And so, like, my dad spoke multiple languages, like 4 or 5 languages. My brother speaks 4 or 5 languages. My sister speaks 4 languages. So, and I have spoken 4 languages pretty at depth in my life, even Mandarin Chinese. And I learned from all of those exposures that I was able to succinctly integrate all of them into my internal landscape, because I had already had a creolized way of looking at the world. I was always able to just naturally pull the most accessible things into my consciousness and draw from them without feeling like I had to break myself into parts. And even though I chose to identify as a Black American, because I was the first one, I was born in America. So the reason why, well, anyway, the point is, even though I made that decision, I was already creolized from a little kid, because I already came into the world speaking English and Creole, and then picked up some Spanish, and I lived in Panama for a little while. Then I went to school and learned Mandarin, and I noticed that I didn't have a problem going into different cultures and holding my own internal integrity while also being able to access lots of components from those other cultures and reflect those back to people so that they felt like they were heard or understood without it being some kind of like code switching or feeling like I was less or any of those other things. That just wasn't a thing for me. And I didn't realize until probably I was in my 40s when I realized that it was really, I'd read this book called Creolizing Political Theory. And then I really got into the idea of creolization, intentional creolization, and like what that would mean for America if we ever got to a place where we all truly just saw each other as Americans and were able to pull from the most accessible parts of the different cultures that make up this country, that we could actually be a very powerful, very influential, very generative, very equitable nation if we were able to take this Cape Verdean type blueprint and look at ourselves as a Creole nation, which essentially we are, but we just don't technically function that way. And yes, white supremacy illusion is pretty much the last hurdle we got to get over, um, because it's just not a real thing, first and foremost. And it's because of it, people are still like breaking themselves into components and trying to navigate this white supremacy culture. Whereas if we were to able to adopt a creolized culture, we would be able to just draw from things in a way that serves everybody. You know, I think about just the different things that I've been exposed to, and like when I walk around the world and I meet people from different cultures, I feel connection to people from different cultures all the time because I have access to that within myself. So I started thinking, well, what if we adapted the Cape Verdean blueprint to some degree? And that's why I'm like really excited about Cape Verde being on the world stage right now. Obviously, with attention comes, you know, criticism and other things like that. But I think that if Cape Verde were to leverage the attention they're getting right now, it would do a lot for them, but it would also do a lot for the rest of the world if we were able to look at how they are able to use their creolized culture to be able to access all of these different ways of showing up in the world. And I don't know, I'm kind of droning on, and it's not as exciting as a video as I hope to be, but I hope that whoever watches this, they get something out of it. If I were to write the script of how this World Cup would play out, Cape Verde would take it all. It's not because I'm Cape Verdean. It's because we need to have more conversations about how we show up in the world, who we underestimate, the limits of our understanding. Because Cape Verde's been around for a long time, and no one knows. Well, no one knew anything about it. I actually had a friend who sent me. He went on a trip to Cape Verde and sent me some pictures, and he was like, "Hey, I'm in this little country you probably never heard of," and I was like, "Bro, my family's from there. I've been there. I spoke that language," and he didn't know, and there's a lot of people who don't know. So now they do, and I hope that if you come across this video, you take the time to look up Cape Verde and learn more about it, but also respect it um, as a nation and as a culture, and don't. I mean, I know some people are already kind of doing to it what gets done to a lot of these creolized cultures when they get discovered. I hope that doesn't happen to Cape Verde, um, but I hope that rather people kind of connect with the culture and get a sense of what's possible when we intentionally draw from the best that we all have to offer. Because I can tell you for sure what comes out of it is delicious food, beautiful people, and a richness of relating that a lot of people don't have. And for my own self, I was just with my family a few days ago, Cape Verdean family, and I really feel like they had so much pride about what's happening with the World Cup, and it felt really good. And I want to say I apologize for not 100% owning my Cape Verdean culture. And I'll say the reason, like I already said, some reasons why, but some of the reasons why is because our world, which does treat Black people horribly, and Cape Verdeans are African, um, largely. I mean, they got European mix and stuff like that, obviously as well, but they're closer to Africa. Um, I did not want it to be used as a tool to distance me from other Black people. That's what it came down to. Is like people would look at me as being outside of Blackness and use it to divide the diaspora, and I hated that. So I chose not to participate. So I just started being like, I'm Black, and just like make if they wanted to dig in, they could dig in, but I wasn't really trying to play that game. So that was my choice. But you know, the world's crazy. Um, so anyway, this wasn't eloquent. There's a lot of thoughts going on. I'm clearly congested and have a cold, if you can't tell. So I don't. My body is not in the best place right now. But I felt like before this game today that I should say something about the most valuable part about Cape Verde to me, which soccer's great, but being able to have a creolized culture um, intentionally, I think is the biggest lesson to learn from Cape Verde. So that's all I'm going to say right now. I'll probably write something more coherent later if I feel called to do it. And I hope you got something out of this. It wasn't as deep as I would have liked, but hey, you get what you get and you don't get upset. Peace.